everyone, it's Marianne, and today I'm sharing with you everything you need to know about bookbinding for beginners. Thank you so much for joining me today, and if you've seen any of my previous videos, you know gardening is my main hobby, but in 2024 I decided to take up new hobbies as well, and one of them is bookbinding. And if you haven't heard what is bookbinding, it is essentially making your own handmade book, whether a notebook, a sketchbook, something for scrapbooking, and more recently and more popularly, especially in book talk, is binding a physical copy of your favorite fan fiction. And right here is my very first bookbind. It is a bookbind of one of my favorite Dramoyni fanfics, one of the first that I ever read. It's The Right Thing to Do and All the Wrong Things by Julie Soto. So Julie Soto wrote the entire story or fanfic that I bookbind. Everything from typesetting it to turning it into a physical book, I did myself. So I'm going to share with you everything that I learned as a beginner, from making my typeset to finally creating the book cover, encasing it in, and having this physical book on my hands. And I know there's already a lot of tutorials out there from more expert bookbinders or people that have more experience with bookbinding, but when I was looking through all of those tutorials, I really need a beginner's perspective who can tell me every single step of the way and also explain every little thing to me. So that's what I'm gonna do in this video. This is actually going to be an entire series to take you along on each step of the way. And don't worry, by the time you're watching this, all those videos are also out as well. I just wanted to divide it into different videos because it is a lot of steps in bookbinding, and you might be at a different stage of your bookbind as a beginner, so you could just jump on to whatever video that is going to answer your questions when it comes to bookbinding, and also it just makes it easier for others to find. But again, it's a complete playlist. I would have the entire playlist link up here down in the description and also in the end screen, so you could watch every single video and everything that you need to learn about bookbinding. And for this very first video, I'm going to share with you all the supplies that you need in bookbinding. And the other videos in this playlist would include how to make your own typeset, and that includes formatting in MS Word, how to insert graphics, how to add page numbers, and how to save your typeset for printing and printer settings. And the next video would be on signatures, what paper you're going to use and how to get short grain paper for cheaper, how to print your signatures in order, how to fold your signatures, and how to press them in a book press. And the third video is going to be on creating a text block, that is punching holes in your signatures, sewing your signatures together, gluing the text block, including adding headbands, ribbons, spine stiffeners, and also adding the end pages. And the last video on the bookbinding series is going to be on the bookcase, getting measurements for your bookcase, assembling your bookcase, adding a book cover and cover design, and lastly, casing it in. So here are the supplies that you're going to need at every step of bookbinding. And all of these items you can find in my Amazon storefront if you're interested in purchasing any of the items that I'm going to be sharing with you today. And when it comes to bookbinding, like with any hobbies, it can get expensive when you're starting up buying all the supplies. And there are certain supplies that you could kind of DIY or just use a substitute of something that you already have. And I'm also going to share with you supplies that I feel like you should buy right away instead of DIYing it, because it's just going to make your bookbinding a lot smoother and a lot better as a beginner bookbinder. And I'm going to share with you supplies that you need in each step or category of bookbinding, like supplies that you need in order to create a typeset, supplies in creating the text block, supplies in creating the bookcase, so that you don't feel that you have to buy all the supplies right away, especially since you're just starting out and you don't know if you're really going to go full in bookbinding, so you just want to take it step by step at a time. So the supplies that you need in creating a typeset, of course, your computer or your laptop to be able to do the typeset in. And as for software, I use MS Word. I do have a Mac computer, but I don't know how to use Pages. I'm more comfortable using MS Word. So that's what I formatted my typeset in. And if you don't have MS Word, you can get a 30-day free trial of it from Microsoft.com, and if you like it, you could keep it. They have different levels of subscription. I got the most basic subscription, which is $19.99 for the entire year. So for me, that is not bad to have MS Word and some other MS Office applications for the entire year for $20. If you know how to use Pages on Mac, you can use Pages as well, but my tutorial on Typeset is going to be on formatting in MS Word. And next, after you created your typeset, you're going to need printer with ink. And with printer, whatever one that you use, you just want that could print double-sided automatically. It can be a lot of ways if you don't use a printer that's already printing automatically double-sided. And the first printer that I used was the Canon Prexia, and that one prints automatically double-sided, and it was only $60. But I did use up an entire ink and more print this thick, and printer ink can be very expensive. So if you're going all out in this hobby and you expect or would like to print a lot more fix for you to bookbind, I suggest investing in a printer that is Ecotank. I got the Epson Ecotank from Target, and it is kind of pricey. It is around $380, but I did get a deal from Target from it, where essentially I just paid $190 for it, and the rest was in gift card, so I could use the gift card to buy my other supplies for bookbinding if you can get a deal like that. And I would put it in my Amazon storefront and also the Target link in the video description for the Epson printer that I got, and it could print up to 6,000 pages before I even have to get new ink. And the ink for the Ecotank is just the same price as if I'm gonna buy ink for a printer that has a regular ink that prints a lot less. It's gonna be more economical in the long run, but if you just want to print one fig or just want to try bookbinding one time, you could go to your local library to get your fig print, or maybe even Staples, but that is a gray area when it comes to bookbinding fan fiction, because it is illegal to sell fan fiction or to profit off fan fiction, and anything that you get printed out is something that you need to have copyright on. And obviously I didn't write the story, so I don't have ownership of it, and even the writer of the story don't exactly have ownership of it because they're using characters from a licensed material. So it's all a very gray area. But you might ask, what is different from me buying a printer to print it? Again, it's all a very gray area. So just use your discretion and just make sure that the fic that you are printing, you have permission to turn into a bookbind. And next, of course, is paper that you're going to use to print the fics on if you are printing it yourself. And just use a regular US letter, especially for your first fic. I just use a 20-pound copy paper, and you could use something that is a little bit heavier, a 24-pound or a 28-pound, but really nothing more than that. And you could choose to use an ivory colored paper or cream colored paper to make it look more like a traditional book, but those can get expensive. So just get something that has a lower brightness, that's maybe around 92, and if you get something in the 80s, that's better. I have some linked in my storefront that have those specifications. But if you want to get short grain paper, you can, but it's just very expensive to get it in US letter size. So what I do is I bought an 11 by 17 paper, cut it in half so I can get a short grain US letter paper. And the benefit of that is, especially if you have thick, this thick, when you open it up, the pages lie flat. If you're going to purchase a US letter paper, the pages are going to stand up like that. It's not going to lay flat, but it's a personal choice. It doesn't really matter if your pages don't lie flat. For me, since I bound it such a thick fic and I plan to bind books this thick, I want to have short grain paper. And a cheap way to do it is to buy an 11 by 17 paper and cut it in half. And the next supply is a bone folder. A bone folder is what you're going to need once you start folding your signatures to help get you those crisp lines on the spine. And you can get a bone folder. It can get a bit pricey depending on which one you get. The cheapest one that I saw was about $5, which is not that bad. But for me, I just went to the dollar store, went to the craft section, and got this painter tool that worked as well as a regular bone folder. You're going to be using a bone folder a lot in every step of bookbinding, not just in folding signatures, so that might be something that you want to invest a really good one right away. But like I said, the dollar store one work just as fine and just as effective as a regular bone folder. And if you are buying a lot of supplies, maybe that is something that you could save money for now. Next is a book press. You could also do a DIY of this. A lot of people have shared DIY, but as bookbinding has become more popular, there's actually a lot of cheaper versions or cheaper book press that you can find on Amazon. I found one for $20. So if you want the same book press that I've used, it's in my Amazon storefront. Other people just DIY'd it. I've also shared in my signatures videos how I did a makeshift book press before my actual book press arrived, so that's also one option. But if you can find a cheap book press or find a way to DIY it for a lot cheaper, then I suggest doing that, because a book press is something that you're going to use a lot also in bookbinding. And something that is optional is Canva. Canva is a website or a software that is for free. You can use it for free, or you could also subscribe to a pro account. I do have a pro account because I use Canva for a lot of things, not just bookbinding, and it's something that I already have. So you can use Canva to create graphics for your typeset, or also use it to design the cover of your book. But again, it's optional. You don't have to. You could just be creative with it without having to use Canva to create a design for your book. And these are all the materials that you're going to need in creating your text block. First is a signature punch. So this is a guide for you to know where to punch holes on your signatures. And you could DIY this. There are a lot of tutorials on DIYing. But for me personally, especially since I have a lot of text block to create punches in and to sew together, I felt that it is necessary for me to just invest in a signature punch. And this one can also get pricey. It can range in different prices. I've seen one as cheap as $18. I've seen some that goes up to $50. The one that I got is from We Are Memory Keepers. This is a popular one for bookbinding beginners. And this cost me about $20 on Amazon. Sometimes it can be a little bit pricier on Amazon, or even in Joann's or Michael's. If you can find it there, it could cost up to $30, but just wait for the price to go down. I waited for mine to go down before I got it, and I was able to get it for $19.99 or $20. And what's great about the We Are Memory Keepers signature punch, it already comes with an awl, which is also what you're going to need to be able to punch holes. And it also comes with a curved needle and some wax thread. And the wax thread it comes with is enough to bind a big book. Like for this one, the thread that I've used to bind all of this is just from the thread that came with the We Are Memory Keepers signature punch kit. So I think that one is worth the money, since you're already also going to get an awl, a curved needle, and some wax thread to start bookbinding with. But if you don't want a kit and you want to purchase them separately because you want a different awl, you want a different wax thread, you want a different signature punch altogether, I understand that. I do have different options in my Amazon storefront for you to be able to assemble your own signature punch kit. So next thing you're going to need in creating a text block is glue. Most bookbinders use PVA glue. It is acid-free and it's archival, and what is good about it is over time it's not going to yellow or it's not going to disintegrate quickly. So that's why a lot of bookbinders use PVA glue in their bookbinding. For my first bookbinding, I used a book glue that was sent to me by an Amazon seller, which I thought was pretty good when it comes to adhesion, but it was also kind of hard to work with. So if you just want to go ahead and get PVA glue, go ahead and get it. I do have some on my Amazon storefront, but honestly, I found it cheaper to get on Joann Crafts. I got a 16 ounce for the same price as a 8 ounce on Amazon, and I haven't really found the same deal on Amazon. And you're also going to need a brush for applying glue. In my case, I've just used an old makeup brush to apply glue, and it worked pretty fine. Using a makeup brush is great because generally they do not shed. You can get one from the dollar store, but I've heard those shed very easily, so I don't use that one. You could also get silicone brushes as well, so that the glue doesn't get absorbed by the brush too much and you save glue that way. Next thing is you're going to need is cardstock. There are many ways that you're going to be using cardstock in bookbinding. One is to create end pages, and usually cardstock comes in 12 by 12 size, so you do need to cut it down. And for cutting paper, I recommend getting this from Cricut. It is about $8 just to get this by itself. It also comes in a Cricut kit with other tools. This is mainly used for Cricut crafts, but as I would tell you later on, Cricut is one of the things that you might want for bookbinding if you don't have one yet. But if you just want a paper cutter, I suggest getting this. This is about $8 or $9 by itself, and it's much cheaper than getting a guillotine. And for me, it does the job, not just cutting my cardstock, but also cutting my 11 by 17 paper to get it into a US letter size. You're also going to use the cardstock for your spine stiffener and also cardstock to assemble your bookcase. So you're going to be using a lot of cardstock. Other materials that you might want in creating a text block but are optional is one, a headband, which is basically this green thing that you put on your text block. It is mainly ornamental. You don't have to have it, and also ribbons to add as bookmarks to it if you want, but again, it's additional. It's not what you need. But what you might need is a binding ribbon, a binding tape, or a maul. And you don't need all three, you just need one of them. And you could also have like substitutes for them. Instead of maul, you could use cheesecloth. But I tried using cheesecloth. It was kind of hard for me because maul is a little bit stiffer than cheesecloth. And instead of a binding tape or a binding ribbon, you could just use regular cotton ribbon, which is what I used for my text block. These are the materials that you're gonna need in creating your book cover. And for most people, this is kind of like the most fun part of bookbinding. First is you're going to need a chipboard. This is the board that's going to be kind of like the backbone of your book cover. And you could buy a whole pack of it on Amazon, or you could do what I did, is go to the dollar store and get a couple of their clipboards that's made of chipboard, and I used that. It was perfect for me. It was actually the perfect height for my books, so I don't have to cut the height, I just have to cut for the width, which made it a lot easier for me when I was creating my bookcase. But if you're gonna purchase one online, get one that is 2 millimeters thick. And next is an X-Acto or utility knife. This is what you're going to use to cut your chipboard. And when cutting, it is helpful to have a sewing mat or a cutting mat. I was able to do away with not having one. I did get one from the dollar store that is a bit small, so it was kind of hard to work with. But if you have a surface that you're okay with scratching, then a cutting board or a sewing mat might not be necessary. Next is a ruler. A ruler is a must, but what kind of ruler that you need is going to vary or optional. So a regular plastic ruler that is about 12 inches long is really all you need. I got a pack from the dollar store. It came with 3 rulers and it worked well for me, but I do find that I always accidentally scratch it with an X-Acto knife. So if you can find a metal one, that is better. And other rulers that you might need or might like in bookbinding is a bookbinding ruler. What's great about this, it has corners and curves to help you with cutting your book cover, so it makes it just easier for you. And another one that I would recommend is a T-shaped ruler or an L-shaped ruler, just to make sure that you're getting your right angles correct and that you are cutting in a straight line and not in a slanted one. Next is book cloth. It is what you're going to use to cover your entire bookcase, and you can find book cloth on Amazon that is ready-made for you to use. You could also DIY it. Again, it's really going to depend which one is going to be more economical for you. If you already plan to bind a lot of books, then maybe DIYing a book cloth is going to be more economical. But as a beginner, I suggest just buying a regular book cloth, but you don't always have to use book cloth. Like the one that I use for my book is a leather repair patch, which is this. And for me, this was a lot easier to work with than a book cloth. It already has adhesion, so it's self-adhesive. I don't have to worry about using extra glue or messing the book cloth and the bookcase with the glue that I use because I don't know how to spread it properly. And it's just a lot more beginner friendly, and I don't have to worry about it bubbling when I was putting it on the bookcase. And the leather patch, you could get it for around $20, maybe cheaper, maybe a little bit more expensive, but you could use it for 2 or maybe even up to 3 books depending on the size of your book. But if you're gonna get a regular book cloth, I do suggest getting one that is already like pre-made and not something that you're gonna DIY. And the last few supplies that I'm gonna mention might be optional depending on how you want to design the cover of your book, but most people do use HTV or vinyl or foil to design the cover of their book, and usually that involves also having a Cricut maker or something similar. So with mine, I did use adhesive foil, but it's not exactly like the foil most bookbinder use. This one works a lot more like permanent vinyl, and I used my Cricut maker to able to cut this design, but I created the design on Canva. It is a lot of steps, I know, but again, once you covered your bookcase with a book cloth or a leather patch, your book is pretty much made. How you designed it is just kind of like extra. But if you're going to go to the Cricut route, you have to choose which kind of material that you want to use. Do you want to use HTV? HTV is the heat transfer vinyl, where you iron on the design on your book cover. And for leather patch, it is okay to use HTV. I haven't done it myself, but I saw other people do it, and they were able to transfer HTV on the leather patch without ruining the leather patch. And if you don't want to use HTV, you could use permanent vinyl. As mentioned, I use adhesive foil for this one, or you could also use actual foil. I haven't worked with foil myself. There's also kind of like different processes and steps when using each of this material, but for most of them, if not all of them, you can use a Cricut to cut the design on those materials for your book cover. And if you're going to go through the Cricut route, you could find Cricut bundles that would include not just the Cricut machine itself, but all the basic materials that you're going to need for creating design on Cricut, like the mat, the reading tools, so maybe even some vinyl. Most of them do come with sample vinyls, and even like the paper cutter that I showed you earlier from Cricut, and any other things that you might gonna need for using a Cricut machine. And what I have is the Cricut Maker, not the Cricut Maker 3, but the Cricut Maker. I did get it as a bundle a long time ago, and honestly, one of the reasons that I decided to take on bookbinding as a new hobby is because my Cricut machine has just been sitting in the cabinet. I have all the supplies that I'm not using, so I thought bookbinding would be a great way to finally use my Cricut Maker again and use up all the vinyls, HTVs, foils that I have that came with my Cricut bundle when I purchased it. Those are all the supplies that you're gonna need for bookbinding for the first time, and as I mentioned, you can find most if not all of these items in my Amazon storefront. And also a lot of the items that I've mentioned, you could find DIYs or dupes for it, so you don't have to get the same exact thing. And you could also find other options in my Amazon storefront for you to build your own bookbinding kit. And if you are ready for your first bookbind, do check out the rest of the videos in my playlist, and I will see you in those. Bye!